We begin this journey from an ancient map where North America appears clearly, a completely unexplored land, promising a future full of challenges and opportunities. The first settlers stood on the shores of North America, their eyes on the land that would become their home, their place to live and grow. On the wild coast, settlers pitched tents and began building their first homes, hoping for a new future on this land. We stand on the deck of an English ship, looking out over the vast ocean. Before us lies the North American mainland, where dreams and hardships await. Inside the first log cabin in Jamestown, smoke from the fire crackled. Settlers conversed, sharing work and ideas for the community's future. Seeing settlers trading with natives at a trading post, the exchange was not only of goods, but also of culture and survival. We attend the first religious service in Jamestown, where prayers echo through the log cabin, hoping for a new life in this strange land. Craftsmen work tirelessly in their workshops, chiseling logs to create essential items for the community. The sound of hammers ringing out constantly. Farmers worked hard in the fields, growing crops such as corn and tobacco, gradually turning the wilderness into the settlement's granary. Building sturdy wooden houses, work took place day and night. The efforts of each person contributed to creating a sustainable community in Jamestown. From the shore, cargo ships docked, bringing valuable goods that helped develop the emerging settlements. Inside the trading post, where people exchange essential goods, each purchase connects the community together. Colonial and native leaders met to negotiate strategic exchanges that helped both sides understand each other better, though sometimes with caution. In the deep forest, people hunt for food. Their lives depend on the success of each hunt. From above, we see the expanding Jamestown settlement. Its houses, fields, and smoke from hearths showing great growth. At a meeting, colonial leaders debated the future of the settlement. Maps and development plans were discussed in detail. On the Boston docks, angry shouts rang out as crates of tea were thrown into the sea. A powerful protest against the taxes imposed by Britain. In the conference room, colonial leaders like Samuel Adams and John Adams fiercely debated how to resist British power, their resilience and inspiration to the nation. At a protest against the Stamp Act in 1765, people held up placards, anger rising at being taxed without representation. At the port, British agents were inspecting the goods. The colonists were worried when the goods were marked with high taxes. This was the beginning of the struggles for freedom. Colonial leaders were arguing fiercely about freedom and independence. Papers and documents were scattered on the table, showing their unyielding determination. At a tavern, news of the British Army marching into Massachusetts causes a stir, with people worried about an impending war. On the Lexington Prairie, the British Army advances, preparing to fire the first shots of the war for independence. In Concord, people stood ready behind rocks and trees, waiting for the crucial moment when they would fight to defend their land. The Battle of Bunker Hill took place in a cloud of gunfire, with British soldiers advancing and the colonial troops standing strong, defending their land. On board the ship in Boston, water splashed as crates of tea were thrown overboard, a dramatic act of resistance to British control. In the streets of Philadelphia, people burned pictures of King George III in protest, symbolizing their rejection of British power over them. In the Continental Congress, delegates signed the Treaty of Alliance with France, hoping for a military alliance that would help them defeat the British Army. On the battlefield, colonial troops faced the British in battle. Smoke from guns and the cheers of warriors echoed everywhere. At the Continental Congress, delegates signed the Declaration of Independence, affirming the colonies' freedoms, marking a major turning point in the fight for independence. At the Battle of Bunker Hill, the British continued to advance, and the colonial soldiers fought tenaciously, defending their land with all their might. After the Battle of Bunker Hill, the colonial army had to retreat, but their spirit was not defeated. They prepared for further battles. During the Continental Congress, leaders such as George Washington and John Adams discussed the need for a standing army to protect the gains that had been made. British troops gathered in Boston, preparing for a decisive attack on the colonies. Colonial soldiers were preparing in the barracks, tending to their guns, sewing their uniforms, and preparing for the upcoming battle. In the town square, people read copies of the Declaration of Independence, their hearts filled with hope for a future of freedom and independence. In the conference room, colonial leaders met with French representatives, signing the treaty to strengthen their forces in the war with Britain. The battle broke out. The colonial army charged forward, facing the British army in a fierce battle. Smoke and gunfire constantly rang out. After the Battle of Yorktown, the British army finally surrendered. Flags fluttered in victory, and America officially won its independence. In a historic room, representatives of Britain and colonial leaders signed the Treaty of Paris in 1783, officially ending the war. This was the moment our independence was recognized around the world. Cheers rang out throughout the streets of Philadelphia as people celebrated victory. The war was over, and a new nation was born, and joy was everywhere. People gathered in the market to read the new Constitution, their eyes filled with hope. Lively discussions about the future of the country took place everywhere. At the polls in America's first presidential election, people lined up to exercise their right to vote. The unity, hope, and future of the nation were in their hands. President George Washington stood before the crowd, Bible in hand, and took the oath of office. This was the moment that opened a new chapter for America. An independent nation under his leadership. On America's new frontier, colonial soldiers stand guard, prepared to deal with any threat. The entire nation must now stand firm in the face of a new challenge. In an important meeting, Alexander Hamilton and James Madison were discussing the construction of a new government. The maps, papers, and books on the table showed their urgency and determination. In the Continental Congress, delegates debated the new Constitution, putting ideas and methods of government on the table. Each decision could change the future of the country. In the convention hall, delegates such as James Madison and Alexander Hamilton argued about the power of the federal government, how to maintain central authority while respecting the liberties of the states. We watched as delegates signed the United States Constitution, a historic moment as leaders stood together to sign the document that would lead this nation into a future of freedom. On April 30th, 1789, President George Washington was sworn into office before a crowd. This was a moment that marked the beginning of the government of the United States, the young nation under his leadership. At the first meeting of the U.S. Congress, lawmakers began to discuss financial issues and the great challenges of building the nation's financial system. Alexander Hamilton was present, pointing out the importance of a strong financial system. While the new nation's capital was being built, the first government buildings rose in Washington, D.C., and workers worked hard, creating the foundation for a strong government. In Congress, leaders like Thomas Jefferson and James Madison debated the fundamental rights of citizens, how to protect individual liberties, and ensure that people's rights were not violated. President George Washington received foreign diplomats in the Oval Office. These meetings were the first step in establishing formal diplomatic relations and establishing the United States' image on the world stage. The American flag flutters in the wind, a symbol of freedom. A new nation has been formed, with hope for a bright future. We walk the streets of a growing American city, witnessing the nation's prosperity and constant progress.